you compared this to news, right? Now, news is an essential service. We had an exception we had an exemption. One moment, let me make my argument. You can counter the argument, but let me make my, make my argument. News was an essential service where we had an exemption from the government of India to go about and send the message to the people. There is no comparison between something which is done for entertainment and something which is a social service. That is news. That is point number one, as far as your comparison on news is concerned. Secondly,
I got your back up there, haven't I? Sorry? I got your back up there, sorry.
No, you haven't. Just making my argument. My point, Charu, over here is, these are difficult and different times. It's not normal. You can't have business as usual. Even in the news business, for that matter, we are not business as usual. There are certain changes that need to be made. Fine, there's a calendar in place, but I would like to draw your attention to the IPL. When people were dying in Delhi, there was, ambulances, medical staff, and I remember you were on a debate with me when we were discussing this. So many resources that were put in so that this game can go on. Do you feel that is the problem? This feeling that the BCCI seems to be in some sort of a bio bubble or economic bubble, or I don't know what bubble, that the game must go on irrespective of what is happening.
Well, I think you could say the same thing of the Tokyo Olympics. It actually went on regardless of what was happening. There were quite a few people who were struck down with COVID there as well, but it carried on. So, I don't want to treat sport as something that's played on a different planet. It's played right here on Earth, and it is something which I suppose is sort of a last bastion of hope and positivity that, yes, it's still going on, and we're still hopeful and we're still positive. I'm not too sure about the Delhi example. I agree that there were resources that could have been used elsewhere. But I'm sure that the IPL resources were not the only leakage of resources at that point of time. There are many other areas which draw resources away. So I'm not condoning the fact that the IPL could perhaps have not at that point being held. But, I don't know how to say this without sounding callous, and I don't want to sound callous, but there is so much death and devastation and destruction going on in our world all the time. So by that regard, we should never, ever be playing sport because there's some flood somewhere or some calamity somewhere else. And people say, why are you playing sport and entertaining people when, there's been a flood somewhere in another part of the country or the world? I do think that you have to allow different professions to do what they're doing if they're not seriously compromising one or the other. Now, in England, of course, if there's a feeling that the ECB has that, now our own safety, the safety of our players may be compromised if, we continue playing with the Indians, then that's why the controversy. But, it can just be played later, for heaven's sake. So it's the World Test Championship that's a bit of a problem. There was another point which I've forgotten. But anyway, so let it be later.
Can I interject there?
Yes,
can I interject there?
Just please.
How on earth can this be played later? I hear your comparison with the Olympics. I don't see any correlation between the Olympics at all. The Olympics is 2 weeks,
correct,
4 years that these athletes train for. They're one moment in the spotlight. Cricket is all year round. How can you postpone this and say we'll have it next week? Next week everyone's going to be in India for the IPL. Week after that, India are off to the World Test, the T20 World Cup. Then they're off to New Zealand. England are off to the Ashes. There's no space to shift one tournament to the next moment. There is no wriggle room, and so we decide the most important tournament. Is it the IPL? Is it a 5-test series? Is it the Olympics? There's no comparison between the two.